Frank Morrison had been sitting at the head of that dining table for 42 years. Same chair, same spot where he could see both the kitchen and the front door, the way a man does when it's his house, his table, his life. So when Derek Paulson walked through that door on a Sunday evening, uninvited, unwanted, smiling like he owned the place, and Carol said, "Derek's joining us for supper. I hope that's okay." Frank's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. When Derek pulled out Frank's chair and sat down in it, Carol didn't say a word. When Derek's hand rested on Carol's shoulder, familiar, possessive, and she didn't move it away, Frank felt something crack inside his chest. His grandson Riley stared at his plate, 15 years old and silent as a stone. The pot roast went cold. That was the beginning. The smell of pot roast should have been comforting. Carol had been making it the same way for decades. Carrots, potatoes, that packet of onion soup mix she swore by. The whole house smelled like Sunday dinner, like normalcy, like 42 years of marriage. But nothing felt normal. Derek Paulson sat in Frank's chair like he'd been sitting there for years. Maybe he had been. That's what made Frank's gut twist. The easy way Derek leaned back, the way his eyes scanned the room with familiarity. This wasn't his first time here. "So, Frank," Derek said, cutting into his roast like he was carving up Frank's life. "Carol tells me you retired from the plant last year. That must be nice, all that free time." Frank's hand tightened around his fork. 42 years at Morrison Manufacturing, starting on the line at 23, working his way to foreman. He'd built carburetors for Ford, Chevy, Dodge, millions of them. His hands bore the scars, his back carried the ache. "It's fine," Frank said. "I'm sure it is." Derek's smile was all teeth, no warmth. "Me, I've been consulting, business strategy, leadership development. Keeps the mind sharp, you know. Can't imagine just stopping." Carol laughed, actually laughed. "Derek's always been ambitious, even back in high school. Remember, Derek, you had such big plans." Back in high school. Frank's jaw clenched. Derek was Carol's first boyfriend before Frank came along. Before marriage, mortgage, 4 decades of building a life together. That was 50 years ago. Why the hell was he sitting at their table now? Riley shifted in his seat, fork pushing food around his plate. The boy had been living with them since August, his parents working overseas. Smart kid, quiet, respectful. Right now, he looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. "How's school going, Riley?" Frank asked, trying to anchor himself to something normal. "Fine, Grandpa." "Riley's doing great," Carol said, but her eyes were on Derek. "Made honor roll again." "That's wonderful," Derek said, not looking at the boy at all. "Smart runs in the family, I guess." "Well, some branches of it." Frank set his fork down. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, nothing." Derek held up his hands, still smiling. "Just making conversation." The screen door in the kitchen rattled in the evening breeze. From the living room, the TV murmured. Some game show Carol had left on. Normal sounds, normal evening. Except nothing was normal. "Derek's going through a rough patch," Carol said, and her voice had gone soft, sympathetic. "His divorce just finalized. I told him he could come by when he needed company. We're old friends, Frank. That's all." Old friends don't sit in a man's chair. Old friends don't put their hands on a man's wife. Old friends don't show up uninvited to Sunday dinner. But Frank didn't say any of that. He never did. Conflict avoidance, his sister Martha used to call it. "You'd rather fix a broken machine than deal with a broken person," she'd said once. She wasn't wrong. "Sure," Frank said. "Old friends." Derek stood, stretching like he was getting comfortable. "Mind if I grab another beer from the fridge, Frank?" Frank's beer. Frank's fridge. Frank's house. "Help yourself." He watched Derek walk into the kitchen, Carol's eyes following him. There was something in her expression Frank hadn't seen in years. She looked alive, animated. The way she used to look at Frank maybe, back when they were young and the world still felt wide open. Derek returned with 2 beers, handed one to Carol. She took it without hesitation. They didn't even drink beer together anymore. Frank drank his coffee black in the mornings. Carol had her white wine on Fridays. That was their routine. Remember that time at the lake, Carol? Derek said, settling back into Frank's chair. Senior year, the bonfire. You jumped off the dock in your dress, soaked to the bone. Carol's laugh was bright, girlish. I was so mad at you for daring me. But you did it anyway. You were always brave like that. Frank sat there, invisible. They were talking around him, through him, like he was a piece of furniture. Riley had stopped eating entirely, just staring at his hands. After Derek finally left, 10:30, way too late for a Sunday, Frank stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes. Carol was already upstairs. He heard the shower running, heard her humming. His hands shook as he scrubbed the roast pan. Soap bubbles caught the kitchen light. Tom Hargrove's porch light was on next door, the old widower probably watching TV. Good man, Tom. Kept to himself since his wife passed, but always there with a wave, a nod. The kind of neighbor you could count on. Frank dried his hands on the dish towel, same one Carol had been using for a month. It smelled like her hand lotion. Lavender, he thought. Upstairs, the shower shut off. Frank looked at his reflection in the kitchen window. 67 years old. Thinning hair. Age spots on his hands. When had Carol started looking at him like he was already gone? Frank didn't sleep that night. He lay on his side of the bed, the left, always the left, 42 years of the same side, and listened to Carol breathe, steady, peaceful, like nothing had happened, like Derek Paulson hadn't just sat in Frank's chair and erased him from his own life. At 4:30, Frank gave up. He made coffee in the dark kitchen, the Mr. Coffee machine gurgling and hissing like it had every morning since 1997. The smell should have been comforting. It wasn't. He took his mug to the porch. The neighborhood was still asleep, houses dark, streetlights buzzing, the Hendersons' dog barking somewhere 3 blocks over. The sky was that deep blue-black before dawn, stars still sharp overhead. The porch boards creaked under his weight. He'd built this porch himself 20 years back, replaced these same boards twice. Everything needed maintenance, needed care, even old wood. Carol appeared in the doorway at 6:15, wrapped in her bathrobe. Her hair was mussed, face puffy with sleep. We need to talk, Frank said. She sighed, poured herself coffee. Frank, who is he, Carol? Really? I told you, an old friend going through a hard time. Old friends don't... Frank stopped, gripped his mug tighter. The ceramic was hot against his palms. They don't sit in my chair. They don't put their hands on you like that. Carol settled into the rocker across from him, the one she'd claimed years ago. You're being ridiculous. Derek and I dated in high school. That was 50 years ago, Frank. We're just reconnecting as friends. How long has this been going on? There's nothing going on. Her voice had an edge now, defensive. God, Frank, you've always been jealous. Even back when we were dating, you couldn't stand that I had a past. That wasn't true. That had never been true. But Frank let it slide, the way he always did. I just want to understand, he said quietly. Carol's expression softened. She reached across, touched his hand. I'm sorry, you're right. I should have told you Derek was coming. It was rude to spring it on you like that. Her eyes were wet, catching the porch light. He's just so lonely, Frank. The divorce destroyed him. He needed someone to talk to, and we have history. That's all it is. Frank wanted to believe her. Wanted it so badly his chest ached. Okay, he said. Okay? If he needs a friend, fine. But maybe warn me next time? She smiled, squeezed his hand. Of course, I promise. The sun was coming up, orange and pink spreading across the horizon. Looked like it'd be a nice day. That week, things were better. Carol made his favorite cornbread on Tuesday. They watched their shows, Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, the routine they'd had for years. She even laughed at his jokes, the corny ones she usually rolled her eyes at. Frank started to relax. Maybe he had overreacted. Maybe Derek really was just a lonely, divorced guy who needed an old friend. People got divorced all the time, especially at their age. It was hard, starting over. He was at the VFW Thursday night, playing cards with Earl and the boys. Earl was 70, all stories and gravel voice, Marine Corps tattoo faded on his forearm. "How's Carol?" Earl asked, shuffling the deck. "Good. She's good." "That's good." Earl dealt. "Marriage is work, brother. 47 years, me and Linda. Some days you wonder why you signed up for it. Then she makes that pot pie and you remember." Frank smiled. "Yeah." He got home around 9:30. Carol was already asleep, or pretending to be. The house was quiet, dark except for the porch light she'd left on. Friday morning, Frank was looking for his reading glasses. He'd left them somewhere. Maybe the den, maybe the kitchen. He checked Carol's coat pockets by the door, the way you do when you've lived with someone long enough to know their habits. That's when he found it, a receipt, folded small, tucked in the inside pocket of her good coat. The black one she wore to church, to dinners out, to occasions. Giovanni's Italian Restaurant. Thursday, October 3rd, 6:47 p.m. Two orders. Chicken marsala, $3,200. One bottle Chianti, $4,500. One tiramisu, split, $1,000. Anniversary special discount applied. Total $8,700 Thursday, 6:47. Frank had been at the VFW Thursday, playing cards, drinking weak beer, talking about the Colts game with Earl. Carol had been at Giovanni's, with someone who qualified for the anniversary special. Not their anniversary. That was June. Always June. His hands started shaking. The receipt fluttered like a trapped moth. The shower turned on upstairs. Carol, getting ready for her day. Humming again, he could hear it through the pipes. Frank stood in the hallway, coat still in one hand, receipt in the other. Whose anniversary? The water shut off. He heard her footsteps in the bedroom, the closet door opening. He folded the receipt carefully, slipped it into his wallet, right behind his driver's license, where he'd see it every time he opened the damn thing. Evidence. He didn't know yet what he'd do with it, but something in him, that factory foreman who'd learned to document everything, check every spec, trust the numbers, that part of him was waking up, and it was furious. Frank Morrison had spent 42 years reading blueprints, checking tolerances, documenting defects. Every part that rolled off the line got inspected. Every variance got noted. You didn't guess in manufacturing. You measured, you recorded, you knew. He started measuring now. Saturday morning, Derek's black Lexus appeared in the driveway at 10:15. Frank was in the garage, pretending to organize his toolbox, but really just watching through the side window. Derek went inside without knocking. Carol met him at the door, smiled wide. They disappeared into the house. Frank noted it. Saturday, October 5th, 10:15 a.m. The Lexus left at 1:30, 3 hours and 15 minutes. Tuesday, the car was back. This time, Frank was trimming hedges. Didn't need trimming, but it gave him an excuse to be outside. Derek arrived at 2, left at 4:45. Thursday evening, while Frank was fixing the dripping faucet in the bathroom, he heard Carol on the phone downstairs. Her voice was low, but the old house carried sound through the vents. "Can't tonight. He's home. I know. I miss you too. Tomorrow, yes, usual place." The wrench slipped in Frank's hand, clanged against the porcelain. Carol went quiet. When Frank came downstairs, she was reading a magazine like nothing had happened. "Faucet's fixed," he said. "Thank you, honey." She didn't look up. Tom Hargrove noticed too. Had to. The man was next door, retired like Frank, not much to do but watch the world turn. Frank was taking out the trash Thursday morning when Tom appeared at the fence line between their yards. "Morning, Frank." "Tom." They stood there, two old men with nothing particular to say. Tom scratched his neck, looked uncomfortable. "Listen, Frank. I don't want to— Hell, this ain't my business." Frank's stomach dropped. "What isn't?" "That Lexus. Been coming around a lot. None of my concern who visits you, but—" Tom trailed off, met Frank's eyes. "You doing okay?" So the neighbors had noticed. Of course they had. In a neighborhood like this, where everyone knew everyone, where Mrs. Walsh could tell you what time the Millers left for church every Sunday, of course they'd noticed. "I'm fine," Frank said. Tom nodded slowly. Didn't believe it. Frank could tell. But Tom was a man who respected boundaries. "All right then. You need anything? You holler." "Appreciate it." Frank went back inside. Riley was at the kitchen table doing homework. Calculus looked like. The boy glanced up, then back down real quick. Too quick. You okay, Riley? Yeah, Grandpa, fine. But he wasn't fine. Frank could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the way he kept his eyes locked on the textbook. Riley had seen something, heard something. The boy was carrying weight he shouldn't have to carry. Frank wanted to ask, wanted to pull out a chair and say, "Tell me what you know." But what kind of man puts that on his grandson? Asks him to betray his grandmother, to choose sides in something a 15-year-old shouldn't even have to witness? You need help with that homework? Frank asked instead. No, sir, I got it. Frank poured himself coffee, stood at the counter. Through the window, he could see Tom back in his yard, pulling weeds that didn't need pulling. Same as Frank with his hedge trimming, both of them just trying to look busy while their worlds shifted. That afternoon, Frank did something he'd never done in 42 years of marriage. He followed her. Carol left the house at 3:30, said she was going to the grocery. Frank waited 5 minutes, then took his truck. Kept 3 cars back, the way they did in movies. Felt ridiculous doing it. Felt like someone else entirely. She didn't go to the grocery. She went to Riverside Coffee, the place with the big windows looking out on the park. Frank parked across the street, engine idling. Watched her go inside. 2 minutes later, Derek showed up. Through the window, Frank could see them. Corner table. Derek said something. Carol threw her head back, laughing, that full-body laugh Frank hadn't seen in years, maybe decades. Derek reached across the table, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. That gesture, that specific gesture, Frank used to do that. Back when they were dating, back when her hair was long and always falling in her face. Back when she looked at him like he was the only man in the world. Now Derek was doing it, and Carol was leaning into it. Frank's hands gripped the steering wheel. The vinyl was cracked, worn smooth by years of driving to the plant, driving Riley to baseball practice, driving Carol to her sister's house. This truck had been everywhere with him. Now it was parked across from a coffee shop, watching his wife fall for someone else. He sat there until they left, separately, Carol first, then Derek 10 minutes later. Like they were hiding it, like it mattered. Frank drove home the long way, past the plant where he'd worked most of his life. The building looked smaller now, or maybe he'd just gotten older. They'd given him a gold watch when he retired. It was in a drawer somewhere, still in the box. When he got home, Carol's car was in the driveway. Grocery bags on the counter, she must have stopped on the way back, covering her tracks. Frank looked at the bags, milk, bread, eggs, the ordinary things. His phone buzzed. A text from the bank. Unusual account activity detected. Please verify recent transactions. Frank stared at the screen. Something told him the coffee shop was the least of his problems. The envelope from First National Bank arrived on a Tuesday. Plain white, logo in the corner, the kind of mail Frank usually tossed to Carol for filing. She handled the bills, always had. He brought home the paycheck, well, the pension now, and she made sure the lights stayed on. But something made him open this one. Monthly statement, joint savings account. The one they'd been building since Frank started at the plant, adding a little each month, watching it grow. Retirement money. Security. The fishing cabin fund he'd always called it. Someday, maybe, a little place up in Michigan. Frank's eyes scanned the numbers. A balance, $23,447. Odd. That wasn't right. Last he knew, they were close to 70,000. He'd checked it. When was it? 6 months ago? Maybe 8. He found the previous statements in Carol's desk drawer, had to dig past catalogs and coupon circulars, started laying them out on the dining room table in order. March, $68,332. April, $61,200. Withdrawal, $7,000. May, $54,800. Withdrawal, $6,500. June, $49,300. Withdrawal, $5,500. July, $4,100. Withdrawal, $8,000. August, $33,900. Withdrawal, $7,000. September, $28,200. Withdrawal, $5,800. October, $23,447.18. Withdrawal, $4,700. Frank's hands went numb. He counted again. Had to be wrong. Had to be. $47,000, gone, in 7 months. All the withdrawals were from the same branch, all made by Carol, her signature on the slips, her authorization, money transferred to. He squinted at the fine print. DP Consulting LLC. DP, Derek Paulson. The front door opened. Carol came in with more grocery bags. She'd been shopping a lot lately, Frank realized, almost every day. Frank, can you help with? She stopped, saw the statement spread across the table. Her face went white, then red. What are you doing going through my papers? Our papers, Frank said quietly. His voice sounded strange, distant. Joint account, joint papers. You had no right. $47,000, Carol. She set the bags down hard. Milk sloshed in the jug. I can explain. I'm listening. Derek needed help. He's been struggling since the divorce, and he was starting a business. A business. Frank's laugh came out bitter. You gave him $47,000 for a business. It's an investment. He's a consultant. He knows what he's doing. He's a con man. Frank stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. And you're the mark. Carol's eyes flashed. Don't you dare talk about him like that. Derek is brilliant. He's always been brilliant. Not like. She stopped. Not like what? Not like me? Frank's voice stayed level. 42 years of swallowing words, keeping the peace. Go ahead. Say it. You've always been threatened by him. From the day you found out I dated him. You've always been jealous. I've been working. 42 years, Carol. 42 years building that savings. You remember what that money was for? She looked away. The cabin, Frank said. You wanted a place by the water, somewhere quiet. You used to talk about it all the time, reading on the porch, watching the sunset. That was our dream. That was your dream, she said coldly. I never wanted to rot away in some cabin in the woods with you. The words hit like a fist. Frank steadied himself against the table. Is it even for a business? He asked. Or is there something else? Medical bills, you said before. Which is it, Carol? Her jaw tightened. It's my money, too. I have a right to steal from our retirement, to give it to some. It's not stealing. We're married. It's community property. Then why didn't you tell me? Frank's voice finally rose. Why sneak around? Why lie? Because you wouldn't understand. You never understand anything that doesn't fit in your little box. Work, home, TV, sleep. That's all you've ever been, Frank. Predictable. Boring. She grabbed her purse from the counter. Derek actually listens to me. He makes me feel young again. He makes me feel, what? Alive? While spending our money? It's not just about money. No? Frank pulled out his wallet, took out the restaurant receipt, tossed it on the table with the bank statements. Anniversary special. Whose anniversary, Carol? She stared at the receipt. Didn't answer. I was at the VFW that night, Frank said. Playing cards. You were at Giovanni's. With him. Silence filled the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, someone's lawnmower started up. Probably the Henderson's kid, always cutting grass too late in the day. Carol picked up her purse. I'm sleeping in the guest room. Carol. Don't. She held up a hand. Just don't. She went upstairs. Frank heard her moving around, heard drawers opening and closing. 10 minutes later, she came back down with a pillow and a blanket. She paused at the bottom of the stairs. For a second, Frank thought she might apologize, might say something, anything that made sense of this. Instead, she said, Derek's medical bills are real. He has a heart condition. He needed the money, and I helped him. If you can't accept that I have compassion for an old friend, then maybe you don't know me at all. She walked to the guest room. The door closed. The lock clicked. Frank stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by bank statements and grocery bags. The milk was getting warm on the counter. He should put it away. He couldn't move. Through the window, he saw Tom Hargrove in his yard, standing still, looking toward Frank's house. Tom raised a hand, half wave, half question. You okay? Frank didn't wave back. Medical bills? Heart condition? Was any of it true? Or was it just another story, another layer of lies stacked so high Frank couldn't see the top anymore? His phone was in his hand before he realized it. He scrolled through contacts, found the number for Miller Associates, the law firm that had handled his mother's estate. Tomorrow, he'd call tomorrow, because $47,000 didn't disappear for medical bills. And that lock clicking, that sound of Carol choosing the guest room, choosing separation, choosing Derek, that was the sound of a marriage ending. Frank just needed to know how much more he stood to lose. Frank didn't sleep. Again. 2 a.m. found him in his workshop, sitting on the old stool, staring at tools he'd owned since he was 25 soon. The belt sander his father gave him, the level he'd bought with his first paycheck, the drill press he'd saved up for, back when saving meant something, when money stayed where you put it. Everything in this shop had a purpose. Everything worked. You maintained tools. You respected them. They lasted a lifetime. Why couldn't people work the same way? The workshop smelled like sawdust and motor oil. Good smells, honest smells. The kind that meant work done right. Frank ran his hand over the workbench surface, worn smooth by decades of projects. How many things had he built here? The cradle for Riley's dad when he was born, the bookshelf in the living room, the jewelry box for Carol's 40th birthday. She'd cried when he gave her that box. Said it was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever made for her. He wondered where it was now, probably in the guest room, holding Derek's lies. The house creaked above him. Carol walking to the bathroom, pipes groaning as water ran. Then silence again. Frank's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the workbench, trying to stop the tremor. Couldn't. His body was betraying him, same as everything else. Sunday morning, Frank went to church alone. Carol stayed home, said she wasn't feeling well. First time in 20 years, she'd missed Sunday service. First Methodist smelled like old hymnals and lemon pledge. Frank slid into his usual pew, third from the back on the left. Could have sat anywhere, church was half empty these days, but habits die hard. Pastor Jim's sermon was about forgiveness. Of course it was. Frank barely heard it. He kept thinking about the bank statements, the restaurant receipt, the lock clicking. After service, Pastor Jim caught him in the parking lot. "Frank, good to see you. Where's Carol?" "Under the weather?" "Ah." Jim shifted his weight, looked uncomfortable. "Frank, we're praying for you both."
These things happen and God works in mysterious. Appreciate it, Pastor. Frank's jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. He could see it in Jim's eyes, the pity, the knowing. Behind the pastor, Frank spotted the Hendersons climbing into their SUV, Mrs. Henderson leaning close to her husband, whispering. Both of them glanced Frank's way. Everyone knew. The whole damn town knew his wife was running around spending their money sleeping in another room. Frank drove past the house on the way home. Derek's Lexus was parked in the driveway. Sunday morning, church time. And Derek was at Frank's house. Frank kept driving. Couldn't go home. Couldn't face it. He ended up at the diner, Barb's place. Been there since 1973. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor, coffee strong enough to strip paint. Dolores was working, 50-something with kind eyes and tired feet. "Hey there, Frank. Your usual spot's open." "Too cheerful?" Voice pitched high with pity.
Frank sat in his booth, the one by the window, ordered coffee, eggs, toast. Didn't taste any of it. The diner went quiet when he walked in, then got too loud. Earl and the VFW boys in the corner booth, suddenly real interested in their pancakes. Nobody looked at him directly. This was his town. He'd lived here 43 years. Built the wheelchair ramp at the library. Coached Little League for a decade. Fixed the church van for free every time it broke down. Now he was that poor old fool whose wife's running around. He left a 20 for a $12 breakfast. Couldn't get out fast enough. At home, Derek's car was gone. Carol was in the living room reading. She looked up when Frank came in, then back down at her magazine, like he was a stranger, like he was nothing. "We need to talk about the money," Frank said. "There's nothing to talk about." "Carol, I said there's nothing to talk about." Her voice was ice. "It's done. Derek needed it. I gave it to him." "You want a divorce over it? Fine. Lawyer up." See where that gets you. Frank felt the floor tilt. Divorce. She'd said it out loud. The word he'd been avoiding for weeks, the possibility circling like a vulture. At 67, divorce meant splitting everything. The house he'd built with his own hands, half hers. The pension he'd earned, half hers. Everything, cut down the middle, and him starting over with nothing. But staying meant this. Every day. Derek's car in the driveway. That lock clicking every night. Carol's eyes looking through him like glass. He was trapped. Stay and die by inches, or leave and lose everything he'd worked for. Frank went to the workshop. Tried to work on the deck. Boards needed replacing, rotting through in spots. He got the circular saw out, measured the first cut. His hands were shaking too bad. The saw blade wobbled, bit wrong, jumped the wood. Damn it! He threw the saw down. It clattered across the deck, cord whipping. He sat down hard on the boards, heard them crack under his weight. Old wood, too much pressure. The board beneath him split clean through. Frank looked at it, broken, just like that. Sunset came, mosquitoes started biting. Frank didn't move. Inside, he could hear Carol's laugh drifting through the screen door. Derek was back. Of course he was. Their voices mixed with the TV. Comfortable. Easy. Like Frank wasn't even there. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he'd disappeared months ago and just didn't notice until now. Tom Hargrove's back door opened. Frank heard it, the familiar squeak of hinges Tom kept meaning to oil. Footsteps on Tom's porch. Silence. Then Tom's truck started up. Frank heard gravel crunching, heard Tom's truck pull out of his driveway and into Frank's. The engine shut off. A door slammed. Footsteps coming around the side of the house. Tom appeared holding 2 fishing poles and a tackle box. "Don't say nothing," Tom said. "Just come on." Frank looked up at his old neighbor. "Tom, I can't." "Yes, you can. Get up." Something in Tom's voice, command maybe, or just kindness disguised as gruffness, made Frank stand. His knees ached. His back ached. Everything ached. "Where are we going?" "Lake. You and me. Right now." Frank glanced at the house. Carol's silhouette past the living room window. Derek's shadow beside her. "Yeah," Frank said quietly. "Okay." Miller's Lake was 20 minutes outside town. Nothing special. Muddy water, half-rotted dock, cattails thick along the shore. But it was quiet. No houses in sight. Just water and trees and the sound of frogs starting their evening chorus. Tom backed his truck up to the dock, killed the engine. They sat there a minute, neither speaking. The sun was setting, painting the water orange and pink. "You gonna tell me what's going on?" Tom finally said. "Or we just gonna sit here till the mosquitoes carry us off?" Frank's throat was tight. "Nothing to tell." "Bullshit." Tom grabbed the tackle box, got out. "Come on." They walked to the end of the dock. Tom set up the poles without asking if Frank wanted to fish. Just did it, the way men do when talking's too hard, but silence is worse. He handed Frank a rod, already rigged. "Cast out there. By them lily pads." Frank cast. The line sailed out, plopped into the water. Ripples spread and faded. "I know about the car," Tom said. "That Lexus. Been coming around for months now." Frank's jaw tightened. "It's not—" "Don't." Tom cast his own line. "Don't lie to me, Frank. We've been neighbors 15 years. I know when something's wrong." The bobber floated, red and white in the fading light. Frank watched it, willing it to dip, to give him something to focus on besides the knot in his chest. "My Martha," Tom said quietly. 5 years before the cancer got her. She had a thing with a guy from her book club. Frank looked over. Tom kept his eyes on the water. "Never went all the way, far as I know, but it was close, real close. I found emails, text messages, all that." Tom reeled in a bit, cast again. "I was gonna leave. Had the papers drawn up, apartment lined up, everything." "What stopped you?" "She got sick. Diagnosis came in, and suddenly nothing else mattered." Tom's voice roughened. "We had 2 good years after that. Hard years, but good. She apologized,
I forgave her. We made it right. I'm sorry, Tom. Don't be. Point is, I almost threw away 2 good years because of pride, because I couldn't see past the hurt. Tom finally looked at Frank. But your situation's different. How do you figure? Tom reached into his tackle box, pulled out a manila envelope, handed it to Frank. Frank's hands shook as he opened it. Photographs. Lots of them. Derek's car in Frank's driveway, time-stamped. Derek and Carol at the coffee shop, at restaurants, at the park. Dates, times, license plate numbers. A log of every visit, every meeting. You been watching? Frank asked. I've been documenting. Tom's voice was firm. That's what friends do. They pay attention. And Frank, this ain't just an emotional affair. This is calculated. Frank flipped through more photos. His stomach turned. There's something else, Tom said. I got a buddy, works at the courthouse. Mentioned your name. He pulled some records. That DP Consulting, Derek Paulson's business? Yeah? Folded 3 months ago. Bankruptcy. Fraud investigation pending. Tom let that sink in. Whatever Carol gave him, it's gone. And it wasn't for medical bills. The bobber dipped. Frank didn't react. His whole world had just collapsed into a manila envelope. Medical bills, Frank said hollowly. She said he had a heart condition. He's got a condition, all right. It's called being a con man. Tom reeled in his line, set the rod down. Frank, listen to me. You got two choices. You can let this eat you alive, or you can fight back, but you gotta do it smart. I don't know how to fight this. Yeah, you do. You worked a factory floor 42 years. You know how to document, how to build a case. You did it every day. Check the specs, note the variances, follow the process. Tom tapped the envelope. This is your process now. Frank looked at the photos again. Evidence. Cold, hard evidence. I called a lawyer, Frank admitted. Miller Associates. Got an appointment Wednesday. Good. That's good. Tom stood, stretched. You take that envelope with you. Show him everything. Financial records, these photos, all of it. What if it's not enough? It's enough. Tom's voice was certain. But Frank, you gotta be ready for what comes next. Carol's not gonna go quiet. Neither's Derek. This gets ugly before it gets better. They packed up the gear as darkness settled in. Didn't catch a single fish, but that wasn't the point. Tom's truck rumbled back down the gravel road toward town. Frank held the envelope on his lap, felt the weight of it. Thank you, Frank said. Don't thank me yet. This is just the start. They pulled into Frank's driveway. Derek's car was gone, house lights on. Carol's shadow moved past the kitchen window. One more thing, Tom said as Frank opened the door. Whatever happens, you got people. Me, Earl, half the guys at the VFW. You ain't alone in this. Frank nodded, throat too tight to speak. He walked to his front door, envelope under his arm. Inside, he could hear the TV, could smell something cooking. Pasta, maybe. Normal sounds. Normal smells. Nothing was normal. Riley was in the kitchen, doing homework at the table. The boy looked up when Frank came in, then his eyes dropped to the envelope. Something flickered across his face. Recognition? Fear? Grandpa? Riley said quietly. Can I talk to you? In the garage? Frank's heart sank. Yeah, son. Yeah, we can talk. They walked to the garage. Riley closed the door behind them, looked like he might be sick. I did something, Riley said. I don't know if it was right, but I heard them. Grandma and Derek. They didn't know I was home. The boy pulled out his phone, hands trembling. I recorded it, Riley whispered. I recorded what they said. Frank stared at the phone in his grandson's hand. What did they say, Riley? Riley's eyes filled with tears. Grandpa, I'm so sorry, but you need to hear this. The garage smelled like motor oil and old cardboard. Frank's toolbox sat open on the workbench, wrenches scattered like he'd left them. The overhead light flickered, needed a new bulb, had needed one for weeks. Riley stood there, Phone clutched in both hands like it might explode. When? Frank asked. His voice came out steady, which surprised him. 3 days ago, Tuesday afternoon. I came home early. Coach canceled practice. Riley's words tumbled out fast, nervous. I didn't mean to spy, Grandpa, I swear. I just heard voices and I thought maybe I should know. For you. Frank pulled over 2 paint buckets, flipped them upside down, makeshift chairs. He sat on one, gestured for Riley to take the other. Show me. Riley sat, tapped his phone screen. His finger hovered over the play button. It's bad, Grandpa. Real bad. I know. No. I mean, Riley looked up, eyes wet. They talk about the house, about getting rid of you. The words hung in the air like smoke. Frank felt something cold settle in his gut, but his hands stayed steady. Play it. Riley pressed play. Static first, then Carol's voice, tinny through the phone speaker but clear enough. Don't see why we have to wait. He's not going to just leave. Derek's voice, that smooth consultant tone. Patience, babe. We do this right. Nobody gets hurt. Well, nobody who matters. Laughter. Both of them laughing. Frank's jaw clenched. Riley watched him, scared. Carol again. I'm tired of sneaking around. Tired of that guest room. Tired of pretending. I want to be with you. Really with you. And you will be, soon as we get him to sign. You really think he'll do it? Just sign the house over? He's old, Carol. Old and tired and too damn proud to fight. We pressure him right, make him think divorce will drag out, cost him everything. He'll sign just to be done with it. Silence on the recording. Then Carol. What about after? Where does he go? Derek's voice turned cold. Who cares? He can stay with that sister of his, or rot in some apartment. Not our problem. Martha hates me. Of course she does. She's always known you were too good for him. More laughter. The sound made Frank's stomach turn. Carol's voice quieter now. Sometimes I feel bad. He's not a bad man, Derek. Just boring. Predictable. But he gave me 42 years. 42 years of what? Factory wages and TV dinners? Come on, you were meant for more than this. Derek's voice shifted, softer, seductive. Arizona, remember? That condo I showed you online? Scottsdale. Sun every day, no more Indiana winters. We sell this place. We can afford it easy. The house is worth at least 400,000. Probably more. This neighborhood's gentrifying. Young couples moving in, fixing up the old places. Papers rustling. I talked to a realtor, off the record, just feeling it out. She thinks we could get 450, maybe 5 if we stage it right. They kept saying Frank's house. The one he'd bought in 1982. The one he'd remodeled himself. New kitchen in 95. Bathroom in 2003. That whole roof replacement in 2010. Every nail, every board, his sweat. They were selling it, planning it like a business deal. Carol, what about the paperwork? Won't he notice if I try to add you to the deed? We don't add me. We get him to sign a quitclaim deed, transferring his half to you. Once it's in your name, you do what you want. Sell it, keep it, burn it down. Doesn't matter. It's yours. And ours. And ours, Derek agreed. Look, the medical bill story is holding up. He bought it, right? Thinks I'm some charity case with a heart condition? Carol laughed. He's so gullible. Always has been. Always wants to see the best in people. That's what makes this easy. Derek's voice hardened. Men like Frank, they're too soft, too stuck in their old ways. The world moved on without them. They just don't know it yet. He does seem lost since he retired. Because he is lost. He's a factory rat who doesn't have a factory anymore. No purpose, no worth. Hell, we're doing him a favor, giving him a reason to move on. Start fresh. You think he suspects? About us? Maybe, probably. But what's he gonna do? He's got no proof, no spine, no fight. He'll roll over same as he always does. Silence. Then Carol, hesitant. What if he doesn't? Then we push harder. Make life uncomfortable. I move in a few more days a week. We stop hiding. Eventually he'll crack. They always do.
Old men. They just want peace. They'll give up everything for peace. The recording went quiet. Rustling sounds, footsteps. Then it cut off. Frank sat there staring at the concrete floor. Someone had spilled paint there years ago, a dried white splash he'd never bothered to clean up. Riley was crying silently, tears running down his face. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I'm so sorry." Frank looked at his grandson, 15 years old, carrying this weight, recording his own grandmother because he knew Frank needed to hear the truth. "Don't be sorry," Frank said quietly. He put a hand on Riley's shoulder. "You did right." "What are you gonna do?" Frank stood, knees popping. He felt old, ancient, every one of his 67 years pressing down. But underneath the exhaustion, underneath the betrayal, something else was stirring. Anger. Cold, focused anger. "I'm gonna call my sister," Frank said. "And then I'm gonna call that lawyer." He looked at Riley's phone, at the audio file that contained his wife's plans to steal his house, his life, his dignity. "And then," Frank said, "I'm going to show them what an old factory rat can do when he stops rolling over." Riley wiped his eyes. "Can I help?" Frank squeezed the boy's shoulder. "You already did, son. You already did." Frank called Martha that night. Hadn't spoken to his sister in near 10 years. Some stupid argument neither of them could remember anymore. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up. "Frank?" Her voice was wary, surprised. "Martha, I need to ask you something." Silence. Then, "Okay. You never liked Carol. You told me so at the wedding." "Said she wasn't good enough for me." Martha sighed. "Frank, that was 42 years ago. Water under the—" "You were right." More silence. Frank could hear a TV in the background, some news program. "What happened?" Martha asked. Frank told her. Everything. The affair, the money, Derek's business fraud, the plan to steal the house, Riley's recording. His voice stayed steady, factual, like he was reading specs off a blueprint. When he finished, Martha was quiet for a long moment. "That son of a bitch," she finally said. "Both of them. Frank, I'm coming over." "You don't have to." "I'm coming over. Tomorrow. And we're gonna fix this." "Martha, you're my brother. I should have called years ago, should have swallowed my damn pride. But I'm here now. We're family, and family doesn't let this shit stand." Frank's throat tightened. "Okay. You got a lawyer?" "Appointment Wednesday. Miller Associates." "Good. I'll be there by noon tomorrow." "Don't do anything stupid before I get there." She hung up. Frank sat there holding the phone, something warm spreading in his chest. Not hope, exactly, but not hopelessness either. Wednesday arrived cold and gray, October wind rattling the windows. Frank put on his good shirt, the blue one Carol had bought him for church. He knotted his tie, the same tie he'd worn to every funeral, every formal occasion for 20 years. Martha showed up at 11:30, driving the same Buick she'd had forever. She looked older, grayer, but her eyes were sharp as ever. She hugged Frank hard on the front porch. "Where is she?" Martha asked. "Inside. Doesn't know you're coming." "Good." Martha pushed past him into the house. Carol was in the living room, TV on, coffee in hand. She looked up, saw Martha, and her face went white. "What is she doing here?" "Family meeting," Martha said, dropping her purse on the coffee table. "We're going to have a conversation." A real one. "Frank, what is this?" Frank didn't answer. He pulled out his phone, texted Derek, "Need to talk. Come to the house. Now." Derek replied within seconds, "On my way." 20 minutes later, they were all in the living room. Carol on the sofa, Derek in the armchair, not Frank's chair this time. Frank had made sure to sit there first. Martha stood by the window, arms crossed. Riley sat on the stairs, silent witness. "What's going on?" Derek asked, trying for casual but his voice tight. Frank opened Tom's manila envelope, laid the photos on the coffee table, one by one. Derek and Carol at the coffee shop, at restaurants, at the park, dates, times, license plates, all of it.
Carol's hand went to her throat. Derek's face flushed. "Seems you two have been busy," Frank said quietly. "This is invasion of privacy," Derek started. "Shut up," Martha snapped. "You don't get to talk yet." Frank pulled out the bank statements next. Highlighted the withdrawals, the dates, the amounts. $47,000 to DP Consulting LLC, which folded 3 months ago. Bankruptcy. Fraud investigation pending. Derek stood up. "I don't have to listen to this. Sit down." Frank's voice cracked like a whip. Derek froze. Something in Frank's eyes. 42 years of factory floor authority, of managing men, of making decisions that mattered, made Derek sit back down. "There's more," Frank said. He nodded to Riley. Riley came down the stairs, handed Frank his phone. "Medical bills," Frank said, looking at Carol. "You said Derek had a heart condition, needed money for treatment." Carol's eyes darted to Derek, back to Frank. "He does." Frank pressed play on Riley's phone. The recording filled the room. Carol and Derek's voices, clear and damning. The plan to pressure Frank into signing over the house, the quit-claim deed, the Scottsdale condo. Every word, every laugh, every casual cruelty. Old fool probably won't even read the papers. Men like Frank, they're too soft. The world moved on without them. He's got no proof, no spine, no fight. Carol's face crumbled. Derek shot to his feet. "That's illegal. You can't record someone without—" "Indiana's a one-party consent state," Martha said smoothly. "Riley was part of the conversation. He was in the house. He heard you. Recording's perfectly legal." Derek's mouth opened, closed. He looked like a fish drowning in air. Frank stood, walked to Derek, stopped inches from his face. "You called me soft," Frank said quietly. "Said I had no fight, no spine." He pulled a business card from his pocket, held it up. "This is my lawyer. He's filed a report with the prosecutor. Financial elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy to commit theft." Derek went pale. "You can't prove—" "I can prove all of it." Frank's voice was iron. "Bank records, witnesses, your failed business, this recording. Every piece documented, every detail checked." He turned to Carol. She was crying now, mascara running down her face. "You have two choices," Frank said. "You take your legal share of the marital assets, half the liquid accounts, half the pension. You leave the house, leave town, leave me alone, or I file charges against both of you. Elder abuse carries jail time in Indiana. So does fraud." "Frank, please." Carol reached for him. He stepped back. "You made your choice months ago. Now I'm making mine." "The house is half mine," Carol said desperately. "You can't just—" "The house was bought with my money. My name's on the deed, not yours. Premarital asset." Frank looked at Martha. "My sister reminded me of that. Bought it in '82. We married in '83. Indiana law says it's mine. It was a bluff. The lawyers had said it was complicated, might not hold up. But Carol didn't know that." Derek found his voice. "This is insane." "I'm not going to—" "Your business collapsed," Frank said. "Records show you took investor money, Carol's money, and spent it on nothing. On yourself. That's fraud, Derek. And the county prosecutor is very interested." Derek's hands shook. He looked at Carol, who was staring at the floor. 48 hours, Frank said. "Decide, leave clean, or fight dirty and lose everything, including your freedom." Martha opened the front door. "I think we're done here." Derek stood, walked to the door on shaking legs, turned back. "Carol." "Go," she whispered. He left. His Lexus roared to life, tires squealing as he peeled out of the driveway. Carol looked up at Frank, eyes red and desperate. "I never meant for this to happen. It got out of control. You stole from me. You planned to throw me out of my own house." Frank's voice was quiet, final. "You laughed about it. I'm sorry. No, you're caught. There's a difference." Martha touched Frank's arm. "Come on." Let her pack. Frank walked out to the porch. The evening air was cool, clean. Tom was in his yard, pretending to check his mailbox. He caught Frank's eye, nodded once. Behind him, Frank heard Carol sobbing, heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the bedroom door close. Riley came out, stood next to Frank. "You okay, Grandpa?" Frank looked at his grandson. 15 years old and braver than most men Frank knew. "Yeah, son," Frank said. "I'm okay." For the first time in months, he meant it. 3 months later, Frank sat on his porch with his morning coffee. First week of January, cold enough to see his breath, but the sun was coming up clear and bright. The kind of morning that made you believe in new beginnings, even if you'd stopped believing in much else. The divorce was final. Carol had taken the deal. Half the liquid accounts, half the pension, no fight. She'd moved to her sister's place in Ohio 2 days after the confrontation. Frank hadn't heard from her since, except through lawyers. Derek had vanished entirely. Word around town was the fraud investigation had teeth. Turned out Carol wasn't his only victim. 3 other women, 2 other business ventures, all collapsed. Last Frank heard, Derek was living in Florida, dodging subpoenas. The house was quiet, just Frank and the morning birds and the coffee maker gurgling in the kitchen. Tom's truck pulled into the driveway. Wednesday morning, like clockwork. They'd started a routine. Tom brought breakfast sandwiches from the diner. They ate on the porch. Didn't talk much. Sometimes that was enough. "Morning," Tom said, handing over a wrapped sandwich. Egg, sausage, cheese. Still warm. "Morning." They ate in comfortable silence. Across the street, a moving truck sat in the Miller's old driveway. New neighbors, third family in 3 months. Young couple looked like. Carrying boxes, laughing about something. "Riley staying?" Tom asked. Frank nodded. His folks offered to bring him to Dubai. Kid said no. Said he wants to finish school here. "Good kid." "The best." The front door opened. Riley came out in his jacket, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Morning, Mr. Hargrove." "Morning, Riley. You need a ride to school?" "Nah, I'm good. Jake's picking me up." Riley looked at Frank. "You need anything before I go, Grandpa?" "I'm fine, son. Have a good day." Riley hesitated, like he wanted to say something else, then just nodded and headed down the driveway. A car horn honked. His friend Jake, right on time. "He worries about you," Tom said. "I know. You worry about him too." Frank smiled. "Yeah." Martha's Buick turned the corner, pulled up behind Tom's truck. She'd been coming by once a week, Wednesdays, like she was making up for lost time. She got out with a casserole dish wrapped in foil. "Morning, boys," she called. "Made pot roast. Figured you could use some real food instead of diner grease." Tom laughed. "Nothing wrong with diner grease," says the man with no taste buds left. Martha came up the porch steps, set the casserole on the side table. She looked at Frank, eyes soft. "You doing okay?" "I'm doing okay." She squeezed his shoulder. "Good, I can't stay. Got a hair appointment, but I'll be by Sunday. We'll watch the game." "Sounds good." She left, and it was just Frank and Tom again. The coffee was getting cold. Frank didn't mind. "You know," Tom said slowly, "there's a card game at the VFW Friday night. Earl's been asking after you. Maybe? Just maybe?" Frank looked out at the street. The young couple across the way were still unloading boxes. The woman, dark hair, maybe 50, caught his eye and waved. Frank waved back. "She's been over there a week," Tom said. "Divorce, I heard. Moving here for a fresh start." Frank didn't say anything. "I'm not saying—" Tom started. "I know what you're not saying," Tom grinned. "All right, then." They finished their coffee. Tom gathered up the sandwich wrappers, took them inside to toss. When he came back out, he paused at the door. "You're gonna be okay, Frank. You know that, right?" Frank thought about it. The house was his again, truly his. The workshop still smelled like sawdust and possibility. Riley chose to stay. Martha was back in his life. Tom showed up every Wednesday without fail. He'd lost his wife, lost $47,000, lost the idea of what his marriage had been, or what he'd thought it was, but he hadn't lost himself, hadn't lost his dignity, hadn't rolled over. "Yeah," Frank said. "I know." Tom left.
The porch settled into silence again, just the creak of wood and the distant sound of someone's wind chimes. Frank stood, stretched, his back still ached, his hands still shook sometimes. He was still 67, still retired, still starting over. But he was still here. He picked up his empty coffee mug, headed inside. Through the kitchen window, he could see his workshop. The deck project was waiting, still had boards to replace, still had work to do. Work he could do on his own time, his own terms, in his own house. Frank rinsed his mug, set it in the dish drainer. Outside, the young woman across the street was struggling with a heavy box. Her moving partner, brother, maybe, wasn't around. Frank hesitated. Then he grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door. Some things didn't change. You helped your neighbors. You did what was right. You kept going. He crossed the street, that morning sun warming his back. "Need a hand with that?" he called out. The woman looked up, surprised, then smiled. "That would be wonderful. Thank you." "Frank Morrison," he said, reaching for the box. "Welcome to the neighborhood. Sarah Chen." She held out her hand. He shook it, firm grip, calluses on her palm. Someone who worked with her hands. Just moved from Indianapolis. Needed a change. Know the feeling. They carried the box up to her porch. She offered him coffee. He declined. Already had his cup for the morning. But he helped with 2 more boxes, offered to check her furnace later in the week if she needed it. When he walked back across the street, Tom's truck was pulling out. Tom gave him a look, knowing, amused, and Frank just shook his head. It wasn't like that. Wasn't about romance or starting over with someone new. It was just about being a decent person, a good neighbor, the kind of man who helped when help was needed, the kind of man he'd always been. Frank climbed his porch steps, stood at the railing. The morning was bright and cold, and every piece of it. He thought about Carol sometimes, wondered if she was happy, if Derek was still in the picture, if she regretted what she'd done. But mostly, he didn't think about her at all. He had a deck to fix, a grandson to raise, a sister to reconcile with, a friend who showed up with breakfast sandwiches and fishing poles and didn't ask questions. He had a life to live. And that, Frank figured, was dignity enough. Frank stood on his porch that evening, watching the sun go down. The sky was doing that thing it does in January, all purple and orange, cold and beautiful at the same time. His coffee cup was empty. He didn't refill it, just held it, felt the ceramic cool in his hands. 42 years. That's what he'd given to a marriage that turned out to be something different than he thought. 42 years of work, of trying, of believing that consistency meant something, that loyalty counted. Maybe it did. Maybe it didn't. But he'd learned something these past months, something the factory floor never taught him. You can't control what people do to you. You can only control what you do after. Carol had made her choices. Derek had made his. They'd lied, stolen, planned to throw Frank away like a broken machine. But Frank had made choices too, to document, to stand up, to fight back smart, not loud, to keep his dignity when everything else was being taken. That mattered, had to matter. Tom's porch light flickered on next door. Through the window, Frank could see Riley at the kitchen table, doing homework. Martha had left her casserole dish. He'd have to return it Sunday. Small things. Normal things. The life he had now wasn't the life he'd planned. It was quieter, lonelier in some ways. The house felt bigger with just him in it. But it was his house, his life, his choices. Across the street, Sarah Chen's lights were on. He could see her unpacking boxes, starting over, same as him. Different reasons, same result, building something new from what was left. Frank took his empty cup inside, locked the door, his door, turned off the porch light. Tomorrow, he'd fix those deck boards. Help Riley with his college applications. Maybe take Tom up on that card game at the VFW. Tomorrow, he'd keep going, because that's what you did. You got up. You kept your word. You respected yourself, even when others didn't. Frank Morrison had spent 42 years at a factory, building parts for machines he'd never see. Now he was building something different. A life measured not by what was stolen, but by what couldn't be taken. And in the quiet of his house, standing in his workshop doorway, looking at tools that had outlasted everything else, Frank realized something. Some men measure their lives by what they built. Frank Morrison learned to measure his by what he wouldn't let be stolen: his dignity, his self-respect, his right to stand in his own house and call it home. That, he figured, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.